1. Panel, ladies and gentlemen, as a finance bro myself, a fun fact about me is that I teach part-time at the University of Asia in the Pacific and Paref Southridge High School. Cool. I noticed that a lot of students and teachers and the academic institution in and of itself is very hostile to generative AI, and I think that's kind of bad because as the world advances towards using it, academic institutions are now pushed to the fringes to have to be able to play catch-up at a point in which they have no alternative or choice. Just like what we saw in the pandemic, wherein these academic institutions had to be able to play catch-up to be able to build all of these digital and online infrastructure, which would have been cheaper and better to do if they've done it 2 decades ago. There are 3 things I'm going to answer in my speech. All of the responses and weighing and all that good stuff will be integrated. The first one is, what is the role of generative AI and what is the purpose of the Academe? We recognize that both the AI and Academe are a means to an end and not an end in itself, so this deals with opening government's correct but underdeveloped impacts. Number 2, how can all of the harms that generative AI is accused of be prevented when we exactly have the proliferation and adoption, especially in the Academe? This deals with opening opposition's rather soft clash when they said that AI tools are fine, but generative AI is not, and also deals with closing opposition's doomsday extension of shitty governance. Number 3, I'm going to answer the question of how democratizing access to certain skills and opportunities through the promotion of these particular adoption actually promote productivity and combat inefficiency. This is me weighing and responding to a lot of the claims we get from closing opposition. And as a judge myself, I just want to point out that opposition in general, we're not taking POIs. I'm not here to be a dick and say penalize them, but just weigh that with regard to the comparatives and responses we gave you from both opening and closing. You're welcome opening, right? So firstly, the first question, the role of generative AI and the role of the Academe and why it's important. Opening government is correct to discuss regulation and proliferation in the Academe, but at this point in the debate, prior to Bolo, it was not particularly clear as an average reasonable person why that mattered. As someone listening in the round, I'm like, yeah, that's correct, it's logical, but so what? That implies that there's a particularly further push and importance of why we have AI and why we have the Academe. And it's precisely because what Bolo told you. It's really about formation. It's really about teaching and conditioning children how to be able to learn so that they can do things like get a job and be successful. The problem with opening is that it was sort of limited to just research in general. Like the motion isn't research, the motion is the Academe. And we think that on our side, we were able to impact that better with regard to how it prepares and helps students. We have to understand that the whole point of artificial intelligence and generative AI is to be able to uniquely be able to actually have better access to particular things. So for instance, unique ideas that you get coming from us are number 1, how we're able to challenge the lens of what smart is and push people to be able to compete in other kinds of arenas. Meaning before, if it was all this magna cum laude, summa cum laude bullshit, we challenged the lens of that when we forced them to make discarte and be able to compete elsewhere. Because when we have the proliferation of these things in AI, even the mid or lower average students now become smart, and that might piss off smart people like Ariel and Jaron on closing opposition, but we think myself as an average student, that's a win for us. You guys now have to compete and do better otherwise. Secondly is that we now push the Academe to be able to innovate and not have to play catch-up at the point in which they're forced to. Life outside the 4 walls of the classroom are evolving in the workplace, in the workspace, in politics and everything. And we think that the academic institution, especially in developing nations, which is the heart of our extension, is essentially really important to be able to make sure that they don't get wrecked by white Ivy Leagues dudes who are trained in these things as opposed to your archaic institutions who are forced to play catch-up. What is the second question I'm going to answer? The harms that generative AI is accused of. Because all of the things that opening and closing tell you are really a function of not having a framework, which thanks Opening Gov you gave to us. But we think that me mechanizing and impacting the framework they gave is that we're actually able to define the scope of what these generative AI are, and you can actually define what's a violation or not. Because right now, when we have no framework, I don't fucking know if like this artist guy really has stake to this like shitty drawing that the AI gave me. But my POI was supposed to be like, guys, don't we get just more eyeballs and scrutiny at the point in which people are able to like look at it? And we think the comparative is simple. The way that generative AI works is that these large language models are able to get more input because it's garbage in, garbage out, right? But when you have an increased adoption, you literally have more people and more input to be able to fact check from. That's how generative AI works, and it just innovates and gets better when you have a bigger pool of data to be able to sift from, and that's able to like hedge the harms that we get. These responses happen upstream of what opening government tell you, and we think that we particularly solve opposition's problems when we tell you that on our side, more people are able to like vibe check all that stuff. Thirdly, really simply, right? Responding to closing opposition. Because they were saying like, oh bro, just take photos or just go to a poetry class. But we think not everyone is able to have the privilege or opportunity to do that, nor is everyone motivated to do so. So like the point in which people are kind of able to like compete better, even if you kind of like gaslight them a bit and say, well, screw you, bro, you're kind of lazy, I'm working hard. We reject that whole lens in its entirety because we're able to push people to work smarter and be more creative. And now for once, the average student like Bolo and myself are able to compete with people who are of magna cum laude and summa cum laude status. Sure, those professors and other students might not like it, but at least it gives us a chance to be able to be proud and be able to do it. The second response, really importantly, is challenging the lens of closing opposition's extension. Because the rhetoric is like, the government sucks, so wag na lang, let's not do this whole thing. So my question then becomes, should we just wreck the entire public school educational system because we have skewed funding or corrupt governments? No, man. You fix it. And you precisely fix it when you actually have an increased adoption, when you actually have a chance to be able to allow these institutions to help those who far too long have felt inadequate and who for far too long have not had any opportunity. We are very proud to take round one of this tournament. Thank you.